The day my children told me I was too old to run my own business, they arrived with a retirement plan already printed. My son had highlighted the monthly income he thought I should accept. My daughter had chosen a senior living community near her house. They spoke gently, as if I were confused. They said the company needed younger leadership. They said clients wanted innovation. They said it was time for me to step aside with dignity. I was 67. The business was profitable. I still knew every major customer by name. And while my children were deciding how to divide authority they did not yet own, I had already received an offer from the competitor they feared most. 2 months later, I sold the company. Not to punish them. At least, not entirely. I sold it because their plan revealed what they believed I had become. A founder whose value ended when succession became convenient. My name is Margaret Ellis, and I built Ellis Commercial Laundry Systems from a rented garage outside Richmond, Virginia. We supplied, installed, and serviced industrial washers, dryers, boilers, and water recovery systems for hotels, hospitals, nursing facilities, apartment complexes, and correctional institutions. It was not glamorous work. People rarely think about commercial laundry until a machine stops and 600 sets of sheets begin piling up. Then the problem becomes urgent. I started the company at 31 after my husband, Robert, lost his job during a manufacturing closure. He had experience repairing industrial equipment. I had worked in hotel purchasing. We borrowed $15,000 against our house, bought a used service van, and began maintaining machines for 3 independent hotels. Robert handled repairs. I handled contracts, parts, invoices, and collections. For years, we worked 6 days a week. Our 2 children, Andrew and Claire, grew up around service calls. They did homework in the office. They knew the smell of machine oil and hot cotton. Andrew learned to rebuild valves before he learned to drive. Claire could organize invoices faster than some adults. When Robert died from colon cancer at 54, people assumed I would sell. Instead, I became president. That decision frightened me. Robert had been the technical face of the company. Some customers believed a widow could handle billing, but not operations. A supplier representative asked whether I planned to hire a man who understands the equipment. I replied, I plan to hire technicians who understand the equipment. Then I did. I promoted our best service manager, Jerome Willis, invested in training, and learned more technical detail than anyone expected. The company grew. By the time I was 60, Ellis had 48 employees, 20 service vehicles, and annual revenue over $11 million. We were not the largest company in the region. Our strongest competitor was Atlantic Laundry Technologies, owned by a man named Victor Shaw. Victor and I had spent 20 years bidding against each other. He was aggressive, strategic, and irritatingly good at remembering margins. We respected one another without pretending friendship. My children joined Ellis as adults. Andrew came first. He had studied mechanical engineering and worked for an equipment manufacturer for 5 years before returning. I made him Director of Technical Services. He was talented. He understood automation, remote monitoring, and energy efficiency. He also believed older systems should be replaced before customers were ready. Claire joined later after working in corporate finance. She became Chief Financial Officer. She improved reporting, renegotiated insurance, and reduced inventory waste. She was disciplined, intelligent, and uncomfortable with anything she could not place in a spreadsheet. I was proud of both. That pride created assumptions. They believed joining the company placed them on a natural path to ownership. I believed years of contribution would eventually help me decide what they had earned. We never discussed the difference clearly. That was my first mistake. My second was allowing family roles to blur with business authority. Andrew called me Mom during executive meetings when he wanted emotional leverage. Claire brought grandchildren to the office during budget season and then became angry if meetings ran late. I tolerated behavior I would not have accepted from unrelated executives. In return, I expected loyalty beyond normal employment. When Claire considered another job, I acted personally wounded. When Andrew criticized the service department, I heard criticism of Robert's legacy. We all carried family history into every operational decision. The conflict intensified after I had knee replacement surgery. I was away from the office for 6 weeks. During that time, Andrew and Claire ran daily operations together. The company performed well. That should have reassured me. Instead, I returned determined to prove I was still necessary. I reversed a parts ordering change Claire had implemented. I personally called customers Andrew had begun managing. I corrected managers in front of them. They felt undermined. I felt replaced. No one said the real words. Then one of our largest hospital clients requested a proposal for a major system upgrade. The project involved water reclamation, digital monitoring, and a 10-year service agreement. Andrew led the technical design. Claire built financing options. I reviewed the proposal and reduced the projected savings because I believed their assumptions were too optimistic. Andrew accused me of being afraid of new technology. Claire said our competitors would present stronger numbers. I said, "We do not promise what equipment cannot guarantee." Andrew replied, "This is why younger companies are passing us." Younger companies. The phrase stayed with me. We lost the contract to Atlantic. Victor's team offered a more aggressive proposal with stronger performance guarantees. 3 months later, the hospital reported early installation delays, but my children focused only on the lost revenue. At a strategy meeting, Andrew presented a succession timeline. Not a suggestion, a timeline. Within 12 months, I would become board chair. Andrew would become chief executive. Claire would become president and chief financial officer. They proposed buying my ownership through a 10-year installment agreement funded by company profits. The valuation was prepared by a consultant Claire selected. It was lower than I expected. I asked why. Claire said the business depended heavily on my relationships and therefore carried succession risk. I almost laughed. They were using my importance to reduce the price while arguing I was too old to remain important. I said I needed time. Andrew became impatient. "Mom, this cannot stay unresolved forever." I agree. You have avoided succession for years. That does not mean your plan is the only one. Who else would take over? That question carried entitlement, not who was qualified. Who else could possibly deserve what had always been presented as theirs? I postponed the discussion. They began moving anyway. Andrew told technicians he would soon control capital spending. Claire instructed our accountant to model ownership transfers. They scheduled meetings with our attorney without including me. When I discovered that, I became furious. Claire said, "We are preparing options. You are planning my exit. You are 67. I can count." She said health events become more likely with age. The words were factual. The use of them was cruel. I asked whether my decisions had become unsound. She cited the hospital proposal. Andrew cited my reversal of their changes. Some criticisms were valid, but they had converted disagreements into evidence of decline. That distinction mattered. The printed retirement plan arrived 2 weeks later. They came to my home on a Sunday. Claire placed the folder on the table. Andrew made coffee, as if kindness could soften the structure. The plan included monthly payments, health insurance coverage through age 70, a company car for 2 years, and office access, by appointment. By appointment, in the company I founded. Andrew said, "We want you secure." Claire said, "We want you to enjoy your life." I asked, "What do you want?" They looked at each other. Andrew answered, "The chance to lead. You already lead departments. Not while every decision can be reversed." Claire added, "Employees need clarity." That was true. Then she said, "And frankly, clients notice your age." Which clients? She named 2 younger property developers who had asked about succession. Questions were not rejection. Still, I heard fear beneath their impatience. They had built careers inside a company whose future remained tied to one person. I understood that. I also understood they wanted control without paying a fair price or accepting external accountability. I said no. Andrew stood. You are proving our point. How? You are making an emotional decision. So are you. Claire said. We are using data. Data selected to produce the result you want. The conversation ended badly. For several weeks, the office became cold. My children spoke to me only through formal emails. Managers sensed division. Jerome, now semi-retired but still advising, asked what was happening. I told him. He said, You built a company, Margaret. You did not build a throne. That sounds like their side. It sounds like the problem. He reminded me I had delayed succession because giving up authority felt like another loss after Robert's death. He was right. The company had become proof I survived. Retirement sounded like disappearance. But recognizing my fear did not make my children's plan fair. I hired an independent succession advisor named Helen Park. She interviewed executives, managers, customers, suppliers, and all three of us. Her report was blunt. I remained capable of leading, but had become overly involved in decisions below my role. Andrew had strong technical vision, but weak financial discipline and inconsistent people management. Claire had excellent financial judgment, but limited customer and field experience. Neither was ready to become sole chief executive. Together, they could form a strong leadership team under an experienced outside chief executive or structured board. They hated the recommendation. Andrew said an outsider would not understand the family culture. Helen replied, The family culture is currently the risk. I considered creating a professional board and gradual ownership transfer. Then another event changed everything. Atlantic Laundry Technologies contacted me. Victor Shaw requested a private meeting. We met at a hotel near the airport. He said he planned to retire within 3 years and was consolidating regional operations. He wanted to acquire Ellis. Not only equipment, contracts, and customers, the entire operating company. He offered a price significantly higher than my children's valuation. Part cash at closing. Part earnout, tied to customer retention. Employees would keep jobs for at least 18 months, with severance protections afterward. Ellis would remain a regional brand initially. Victor's company had stronger technology systems and purchasing power. The offer was not perfect. Competitors do not become generous because of sentiment. Atlantic wanted our service network and hospital accounts. Still, the valuation was fair. The employee protections were negotiable. For the first time, I had an alternative. That knowledge changed my posture. I did not tell Andrew and Claire immediately. That was another mistake. I began negotiating confidentially under a non-disclosure agreement. I told myself secrecy was required. It was. But part of me enjoyed possessing a choice they did not know existed. They had arrived with my future, printed. Now I held theirs. The midpoint revelation came through the hospital contract we lost. Atlantic struggled to deliver the promised water recovery performance. The hospital issued penalties. Victor admitted his team had underestimated installation complexity. Then he said, Your original assumptions were closer. I felt vindicated. But he also showed me something else. Atlantic had software, capital, and scale. Ellis had field judgment and customer trust. Together, the companies could outperform either alone. This was not simply selling to an enemy. It could be a strategic combination. I asked whether Andrew and Claire could hold leadership roles after acquisition. Victor said yes, if independently assessed. That condition mattered. They would not inherit titles. They would earn positions. I negotiated harder. Retention bonuses for employees. A funded pension contribution for long-service technicians. Guaranteed apprenticeship programs. A separate foundation, using part of the sale proceeds to support trade education. My children would receive no automatic ownership from the transaction because the shares were mine. However, I planned substantial family trusts for them and the grandchildren after closing. Not as payment for the business, as inheritance chosen separately. Then Claire discovered the sale. She noticed outside legal fees in a holding company account. She had access as CFO. The code name on the invoice meant nothing to her, but the law firm specialized in mergers. She confronted me. "Are you selling?" I did not lie. "I am considering an offer." Her face went white. "To whom?" "I cannot discuss it yet." "Is it Atlantic?" Silence answered. She called Andrew. Within an hour, both were in my office. Andrew slammed the door. "You would sell Dad's company to Victor Shaw?" "Your father built it with me." "You would destroy the family legacy?" "What legacy? A discounted installment plan and office access by appointment?" Claire said, "We were trying to protect continuity." "So am I." "By selling to a competitor?" "By placing the company with an organization that has capital, systems, and professional leadership." Andrew accused me of revenge. That accusation landed because revenge existed inside my motivation. Not all of it. Enough. I said, "Part of me wants you to understand you do not own what you have not purchased." Claire began crying. "We spent our careers here. So did 48 other people. We are your children." "Yes, that should matter." "It does. It does not settle valuation or qualification." The conversation became ugly. Andrew said Robert would never approve. I said Robert had trusted me to run the company after his death. Using him ended the meeting. My children resigned 2 days later. Not officially at first. They stopped attending meetings and told employees they could not support the sale. Then they submitted letters. Andrew accepted a role at a regional equipment manufacturer. Claire joined a consulting firm. Their departures destabilized the company. Some managers believed I had forced them out. Others supported the sale. Rumors spread. The buyer became nervous. Victor asked whether customer relationships depended on my children. I said no too quickly. Andrew held technical trust with several accounts. Claire controlled financial knowledge. Their absence mattered. I felt betrayed. Then Helen said, "You wanted them to face life outside the business. They are doing that." That was true. I could not demand independence and resent its consequences. The stronger final confrontation came at the shareholder and family meeting before signing. Because I owned 82% of the company, I could approve the sale. A small employee trust held 10%. Andrew and Claire each held 4% from past gifts. They could object, but not block. They hired an attorney. They argued the sale process undervalued future growth and failed to consider a family buyout. Their expert valued the company higher than their original offer to me. That hypocrisy made me furious. I asked Claire, "Why is the company worth more when I am selling to someone else?" She replied, "Because Atlantic can create synergies. Then their offer reflects value you did not plan to pay." Andrew said the family deserved a chance to match. I gave them one. 30 days. Same major terms. Cash at closing. Employee protections. Working capital commitments. Independent leadership assessment. They could not finance it without personal guarantees and outside investors. They asked me to finance most of the purchase over 15 years. That returned us to the original problem. Company profits would buy my shares while they controlled the company. I would carry the risk. I declined. Andrew said, "You care more about money than family." I answered, "You care about family when it reduces what you pay." The room became silent. Then Claire said something more honest. "We thought you would give it to us." There it was. Not buy, not earn, give. I asked why. "Because we are the next generation." "That is biology, not a transaction." She cried. I did too. I had allowed them to believe inheritance and succession were the same thing. That was my responsibility. I said I should have told you years ago that working here did not guarantee ownership. I let assumption do the parenting because the conversation was uncomfortable. Andrew looked away. The sale closed 3 weeks later. Atlantic acquired the operating company and leased 2 properties I retained through a separate entity. Employees received retention packages. No one was laid off at closing. Victor appointed an outside regional president. Some Ellis managers advanced, others left. The company name remained for 2 years, then became Atlantic Ellis Services. That hurt more than I expected. My name disappeared gradually from trucks and invoices. I had chosen the sale. I still grieved it. Financially, the transaction secured my retirement, funded the employee trust payout, and created the Trade Education Foundation. I placed money into trusts for Andrew and Claire, but not immediately. The trusts supported education, healthcare, and future inheritance. They did not give them control of the sale proceeds. When they learned this, Andrew called it another act of control. He was not entirely wrong. Trusts are control extended into the future. I reviewed the documents and loosened restrictions. That was growth. I did not want to spend retirement managing adult children through money. For nearly a year, Andrew barely spoke to me. Claire communicated through birthday messages and updates about the grandchildren. Family holidays became divided. I had sold the company to protect value and create accountability. The personal cost felt enormous. People congratulated me on the deal. They said, "Now you can relax." I hated that. Retirement was not relaxation. It was the sudden absence of urgency. I woke at 5:30 with no service reports, no customer calls, no reason to check weather across 3 states. For months, I felt invisible. That forced me to confront the fear beneath my delay. My children had been wrong to use age as evidence of incompetence. They had been right that I needed a life not organized around being necessary. I joined the foundation board. I mentored women in skilled trades. I learned to garden badly. I traveled with Jerome and his wife to visit equipment plants in Germany, then realized I had turned vacation into industry research. Some habits remain. Andrew's outside job changed him. At the equipment manufacturer, he reported to a vice president younger than he was. His proposals required financial modeling and people plans. He could not call the executive mom or use family history in an argument. He became more disciplined. 2 years later, Atlantic recruited him to lead regional technical innovation. He accepted after an independent interview process. He did not receive the chief executive title. He earned authority gradually. Claire's consulting work exposed her to family businesses with succession conflicts worse than ours. She began calling more often. One evening she said, "I understand why Helen recommended outside leadership. That does not mean you had no reason to be angry. I know." She admitted their original valuation had been designed around what they could afford, not what the company was worth. They called it fair because they expected me to subsidize the gap. "I'm sorry," she said. I accepted. Then I apologized. "I used the Atlantic offer to make you feel replaceable." She became quiet. "That is exactly how it felt." "I know. That was my part." The sale was strategically defensible. The way I held it in secrecy contained punishment. I had wanted my children to discover that the business could choose a future without them. They did. The lesson cost all of us. Andrew's reconciliation came later. We met at a service center Atlantic had renovated. The old Ellis logo remained on one wall. He said they kept Dad's first service van. The restored van sat in the lobby. I touched the dented door. Andrew asked whether I regretted selling. "Some days." "Do you regret not selling to us?" "No." He nodded. "I wasn't ready." Neither was Claire. "You weren't ready to leave." "That too." He looked at me. "I thought age made you weak. I thought youth made you reckless." We were both lazy. That was an interesting word. lazy judgment, age as shortcut, youth as shortcut, family role as shortcut. We had used categories instead of evaluating behavior. Andrew apologized for telling employees I was incapable. I apologized for questioning his loyalty because he wanted authority. The business no longer belonged to either of us. That made honesty easier. Victor retired 3 years after the acquisition. Before leaving, he sent me a report. Revenue had increased. Service response time improved. Employee count grew modestly. The hospital client eventually returned under a revised contract after Atlantic corrected the failed installation. Alice had not been destroyed. It had changed. Some employees disliked the corporate systems. Some benefited from better training and benefits. No ending satisfied everyone. That is reality. The Trade Foundation funded its first apprenticeship class of 20 students. At graduation, one young woman said she had chosen commercial equipment repair because she saw me speak about building a business after widowhood. That moved me more than any sale multiple. Legacy was not ownership alone. It was skill transferred, opportunity created, standards carried forward. My children had treated the company as the family legacy because shares were visible. The deeper legacy existed in people who could repair machines, serve customers, and build careers after our name left the door. I am 72 now. I remain landlord of one former Ellis property, though Atlantic has an option to purchase. I still review the lease too carefully. Claire says retirement has not cured me. She is right, our family is closer, not unchanged. The sale created a permanent line in our history. We do not pretend it did not hurt. We discuss it with more honesty than we once discussed succession. Andrew now tells his own children that joining a family business guarantees work, not ownership. Claire teaches clients to separate inheritance, employment, and control in writing. Those lessons came from failure. Useful lessons often do. People hear the title and expect a revenge story. Children call mother old. Mother sells company to competitor. Children lose inheritance. That is not exactly what happened. They did receive inheritance. They lost automatic control. I received a fair price. I also lost the business that carried my husband's memory and much of my identity. The competitor gained assets. Employees gained protections and uncertainty. Everyone paid something. Justice was not watching my children panic. Justice was refusing to hand over a company below value because guilt made succession easier. Growth was admitting I used the sale to wound them after they wounded me. Age did not make me incapable. It did make time more valuable. I no longer wanted another decade of family conflict over control. Selling created an ending none of us had the courage to design gradually. I wish we had begun sooner. Independent board members, clear development plans, written ownership expectations, a timeline based on readiness instead of age. We did not. The sale became the decision left after years of avoidance. I keep the original retirement plan in a drawer, the one with office access by appointment. Sometimes I read it and feel angry again. Then I notice the care hidden inside the insult. Health insurance, income security, a place near Claire. My children were not trying only to steal. They were afraid. Afraid I would become ill. Afraid the business would lose value. Afraid their careers had been built on a future I might never release. Fear does not excuse entitlement. It explains the urgency. My response contained fear too. Fear of becoming irrelevant. Fear Robert's work would be forgotten. Fear that stepping aside meant the end of the part of life where people needed me. We all called fear strategy. That was the deepest mistake. My children said I was too old to manage my business. They were wrong. I was still capable. But capability was not the only question. The company needed succession. My children needed evaluation. I needed an identity outside authority. The competitor offered a solution none of us liked enough to choose together, so I chose it alone. Years later, I do not measure the decision by whether Atlantic succeeded or whether my children apologized. I measure it by what we learned afterward. Ownership must be discussed before expectation hardens into entitlement. Age must be evaluated through performance, not assumption. Family love cannot replace contracts. And selling a business can preserve value while still exposing failures no purchase agreement can repair. I sold the company because it was mine to sell. I used part of the proceeds to support my family because they were mine to love. Those were separate decisions. Once we finally understood that, we began becoming a family again. Last spring, the foundation held an apprenticeship ceremony inside the old Ellis warehouse. Atlantic had renovated one section into a training lab. The walls still carried marks from shelves Robert installed 30 years earlier. Andrew stood beside a digital monitoring station. Claire handed certificates to graduates. I sat in the front row with my grandchildren. For the first time, all three of us occupied the same business space without arguing about who controlled it. A student asked whether Ellis had been a family company. I said yes. Then she asked whether it still was. I looked at the technicians, managers, students, and employees moving through the room. In a different way. That answer felt honest. A company can leave family ownership and still carry family effort. A founder can sell without erasing the work. Children can lose control and still inherit knowledge. The old story had been about who would own the next chapter. The better question was who would be prepared to build it. None of us understood that soon enough. We understand it now. A few months after that ceremony, Claire asked whether I would speak to a group of business owners about succession. I agreed on one condition. She would speak with me. On stage, she explained how adult children can mistake years of service for a guaranteed transfer of ownership. I explained how founders can mistake delay for protection. Andrew joined during questions and described what it felt like to build a career inside a promise that had never been clearly made. No one in the room looked comfortable. That was useful. Afterward, a woman my age approached me. Her 2 sons worked in her company, and she had not discussed valuation, voting rights, or future roles. She said, "I thought we had time." So did I. She asked what document should come first. I told her the first step was not a document. It was a conversation in which no one was allowed to use love as proof of entitlement or sacrifice as proof of permanent control. Then the documents could protect what the conversation revealed. That became the work I carried into retirement. Not teaching founders to sell, not teaching children to wait. Teaching families to separate 4 questions they often mix together. Who is qualified to lead? Who owns the shares? Who deserves inheritance? What relationship do we want after the business changes? Those answers may overlap. They are never automatically the same. My family learned that through pain. Helping others learn it earlier became one way the sale continued producing value after the money had already changed hands.